Which, by the way, if you just for a second look back at chapter 24, verse 7, it says, "And he, Moses, took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people, and they said, 'All that the Lord has said will we do, and be obedient.'" So they made that, we're going to do anything that God tells us to do. We're going to be obedient. That was in chapter 24. And then you get all of this tabernacle stuff in the interim, and now we jump back into the story and look at how it begins with chapter 32. Keep in mind, Moses is up on the mount for 40 days and 40 nights. That's a long time to be out of sight, out of mind for these people. Chapter 32, verse 1 starts, "And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, 'Up, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him.'" We don't have any idea what happened to him, but we need gods to lead us. And so Aaron, notice he, in verse 4, taking all of the gold and the earrings from the people, he fashioned a graven calf. And he says to them, this after this molten calf is prepared, and they said, "These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt." Now, just so you know, the Hebrew word there, "these be thy gods," the Hebrew word is Elohim. Now, this is a very, very sacred name for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints today. And so we need to be careful how we use it, but understand that in their context, in history, this was not the name of God. This simply meant, so it's God, and then it's pluralized. So it just means gods. So when the people are dancing around this golden calf and they're saying, "Behold the gods who brought us through the Red Sea on dry ground," they're actually calling the golden calf Elohim. That's the title. That's what it means, the gods. And that name or that title of Elohim gets used multiple times in the Old Testament. In fact, there was, in my mind, the definitive article written on this, the name of Elohim, was written by Paul Huskisson and Ryan Davis. It's called Usage of the Title Elohim, if you want to Google that. And today, of course, it's a very sacred title that we use to refer to God the Father. But it has not always been reserved with such sacred respect as it is today.
It's really sad God has put this much effort into saving his people because he committed to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to do it. And he's like, "Look at all the great work I've done for you. Please be my people." And what do? They're like, the god Hathor, who's kind of this calf god, got us out in Egypt. We really liked her. Or some other forms of God. It seems like it's really hard to get Egypt out of the people. God got them physically out of Egypt, and yet they seem in their hearts to want to turn back to Egypt and to make their own gods, just like the Egyptians had done, to worship them. Like, how does that make sense? Why would you worship something that you made? Why wouldn't you worship something that made you? That's what God's trying to do. And this is one of these pivotal chapters in all of Scripture to tell all of us what happens when we lose focus on who ultimately is the great engraver, the great image maker. It is God. God makes us in his image. And then we get this feast going on. Aaron's like, "Let's have a big feast." The word holy day, right? A holiday. And they kind of just, it's like this drunken revelry of this excitement about some gold calf they've made. And you can just imagine God like, "I cannot believe what my people are doing."
Well, you see what God does. In verse 7, "The Lord said unto Moses, Go, get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves."
And by the way, it's interesting how God says it. There's some really interesting words. The people, for thy people, which thou broughtest. It's almost like God saying, "They're not mine anymore, Moses. They're your people, and I'm going to let you handle this one."
Yeah, as our King James Version of the Bible comes to us today in these particular passages here, these verses, they almost paint a picture of a God who has become very aloof and very angry at the people and wants to just destroy them. That's how it's going to come out in this next column. Thankfully, we have quite a few Joseph Smith translation helps along the way in this chapter. Because when Moses comes down off of the mount and he sees that, you'll notice before he actually comes down, the Lord tells him, my wrath may wax hot against them, that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. That's a fascinating dichotomy there. My anger is I'm going to destroy them, and then I'm going to make of you a great nation. Moses besought the Lord, pleading with him, don't destroy them.
He's like an intercessor.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that Moses is a Christ figure here, that he has to intercede. Now let's give the covenantal context briefly, because you might say, wait, how is it? I thought God was loving and merciful and forgiving, and all those things are true. But if you, again, remember the covenantal context, that God is bound when we do what he says. So let's not look at how God might be angry or so forth and think that's like some permanent description of how he is, but read the covenantal context, that he's covenantally obligated to give people blessings or curses based on how they choose to act.
You know, that's really helpful, Taylor. And you'll see this covenantal connection that God keeps reminding us of in verse 13. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Isn't it fascinating? He doesn't use the name Jacob there. It's Israel in this context in our King James Version.
And it's actually Moses reminding God about an eternal covenant God made. So here the people have broken the conditional covenant at Mount Sinai. And Moses says, well, it's interesting, God, you made an unbreakable covenant and promises to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, or Israel. So you should give these people another chance. And it's powerful. The word remember is typically used to get us to remember our covenants and what God has done for us. And yet here, Moses as an intercessor, as a Jesus Christ character, is reminding God or asking him to remember what he has been obligated to do. And it's a conditional if-then covenant. And that's what's going on here. So you have these two major covenants. The Abrahamic covenant, it's God's covenant in perpetuity. The Mosaic covenant is what God's offered us. And if we choose to live it, we get full access to the Abrahamic covenant. Pretty powerful.
It is. Now look at verse 15. So Moses turned, and he went down from the mount, and the two tables of the testimony were in his hand. The tables were written on both their sides. On the one side and on the other were they written. Remember, we talked about it before, written by the finger of God. So as he comes down, he sees what's going on, and he, in that moment of frustration, he breaks those two tablets. That's the only way to really destroy something written in stone, is to drop it in such a way that it will shatter and break up into pieces. Which, by the way, many times when we read this story, we assume that he just broke the 10 Commandments. Now he's going to go up and get a second copy of the 10 Commandments. Fair enough. Many of our Christian and Jewish friends of other faiths, that's often how this passage is interpreted. Not always, but often. Thanks to the Joseph Smith translation that we're going to get when we get over to chapter 34, we see that, God had so much more to offer them when Moses was coming down the first time, that what was written on that set of tablets was actually a higher law that gets broken. And because of their unfaithfulness, they have to take a lower law of the priesthood as the set of covenants. Almost as if to say, they're not capable yet at this phase, having come out of 400 plus years of apostasy, they're not capable yet of this higher law of the gospel. So we're going to give them a lesser law, is often how that gets interpreted when you look at the JST in chapter 34 that we'll get to in a little bit. So verse 30, it came to pass that on the morrow that Moses said unto the people, ye have sinned a great sin, and now I will go up unto the Lord. Peradventure I shall make an atonement for your sin. So he's saying to them, I'm going to go up and I'm going to plead with God not to destroy you. So that experience of Moses up on the mountain, and he's using this word in the Old Testament context of atonement. And you'll notice that the word atonement shows up multiple times in the Old Testament, many times in the Book of Mormon, but it only shows up one time in the New Testament, in Romans chapter 5, one time. in the King James Version of the Bible. So what he's doing, he's going back up to make this pleading intercession for the children of Israel so that God doesn't destroy them. Well, that event, they call that the Day of Atonement, or today in Jewish festivals, Yom Kippur. This remembrance of what Moses did to intercede on behalf of the children of Israel. So when you hear Day of Atonement or Yom Kippur, we're not referring specifically in that context to what Jesus did. We're referring to this event, which is a symbol for us as Christians today of what Jesus would one day do when he came to the earth to make the ultimate intercession between God and all of humankind to redeem our souls from death and hell, that awful monster, as Jacob refers to it.